I'll try just to hit some of the highlights. With vaccine technologies, if the virus and target is in the middle there, it's showing the core with the RNA for coronavirus, the kind of outer shell with the spike proteins. You can use that whole thing to target the immune system, to train the immune system to protect you against the virus, or you can use just a part of it, like a subunit, just the spike protein. So the current vaccines that are licensed for COVID really just focus on the spike protein. You can even take a gene from one virus and put it into a different virus and use that for a vaccine. So one virus brings in the genes for another virus, and that's a little bit of what we do in our lab, where we're developing viral vectors to put genes from other viruses in, so you can vaccinate against several different viruses with one virus. And then you can whittle it down even more to just the DNA or RNA. And so really the two COVID vaccines are just bits of RNA corresponding to the spike protein that are used as the vaccine. So it's really kind of cool and high tech. And then you can even just use peptides, just the building blocks of the spike protein as a vaccine. So you can go from the whole virus all the way down to just some of the building blocks of the virus. So just a quick slide on showing the two COVID vaccines now are just the RNA corresponding to that spike protein wrapped in what they call a lipid nanoparticle. So it's a very small assembly, and that lipid wrap protects the RNA so it doesn't get chewed up by our immune system after it's injected. And it also helps that RNA get into a cell. So in a way, it mimics a virus infection, but it's not a virus. What it does is that RNA gets inside the cell, it makes proteins, and those proteins show up on the surface of your cells, and that makes the immune system think there's a virus infection going on. The immune system recognizes that's a new protein, and it responds. But since it's just that one protein, it really can't cause infection, it doesn't cause disease, but it can cause an immune response. So in a way, we're kind of tricking the immune response to think that we are infected when really we're not. We're just expressing a new protein. But that should then gear up the immune defenses so that if it ever sees that same protein again, it will completely knock it out or completely knock out the virus. Why do we vaccinate? So why, normally you get infected, your immune system will respond and limit the virus, but sometimes the virus wins. Why is that? So those protective mechanisms, I don't know if I can go back, the antibodies and T cells take several days initially, sometimes weeks to generate. Whereas, say, the neutrophils and macrophages and interferon, those work right away. So those protect us from the moment the virus enters the body. Antibodies and T cells, though, are probably more effective, but they take longer to generate. So it says super detailed thing showing that basically there's different times of the immune response, and the vaccine tries to hurry up the response that takes longer to develop. And once it develops, though, it's super powerful, and it usually lasts for a lifetime. So it has a thing called memory. So your immune systems, antibodies, and cells that you generate to the vaccine, they stay in your body for pretty much your whole life. So if you ever get exposed to that virus, they'll shut it down before it can do any harm. So that's what makes it so cool. That's what this slide is showing. So the memory response is really what we're trying to get at with vaccines. It really speeds up those antibodies and T cells. It makes them much more powerful. You think of it as really you're building the army in your body to fight the infection, because it is an arms race. The virus gets in there and grows really fast. It makes millions of copies, and it starts spreading everywhere. And the immune system responds the same way. It makes lots of cells, lots of antibodies to fight back. And so if that army is already built up and there waiting, the virus has much less of a chance, if any at all. And then these immune forces tend to localize to the sites of infection too. So they're there, say in the lungs and in your sinuses, waiting for the virus. So it really doesn't have much of a chance at all. And then just a couple slides, really, this is showing it in the kind of the diagram level. I like graphs and diagrams. So overall, before a vaccine or before you're exposed to an infection, you may have one blood cell out of thousands that are circulating in your body that could respond to an infection. But when you inject a vaccine, that expands, that cell number grows. And it keeps growing. So a lot of times we'll give boosters, so that'll increase the number of cells that are shown on the left. And even after the response kind of dies down, you'll get, a real immune response initially. Even after that subsides in a couple of days or a week, those memory cells that you build up stay in circulation for life. And then with antibodies, there are factors that are secreted in blood. And actually, they show up in our secretions. They're in tears and mucus, saliva. So those levels get boosted, and then they get shed basically in our saliva for life. So everything you've been exposed to that's infectious, every vaccine that you've gotten causes these responses that your whole body will make the rest of its life to protect you. It's really cool. Couple more diagrams and we'll be finished. So this is showing antibodies, what they do. Antibodies are kind of these Y-shaped molecules, blue molecules that are all over the place. So they're very, very specific for whatever they're generated to, perhaps the spike protein of the virus. And you make lots of them, and they bind very specifically and tightly, and they don't let go. So basically they coat the surface of the virus with big protective proteins, and they block the virus's ability to get into cells. And also when they coat the virus, it makes it more tasty to those amoeba-like cells, the Pac-Man-like cells that gobble up things that look wrong in the body. So the phagocytes, when they see those antibody-coated viruses, they mop them up and chew them up very rapidly. And then a super detailed slide. This is showing again, maybe one cell in the bottom panel, a naive cell, that blue cell that could respond to coronavirus if you hadn't been infected or you hadn't been vaccinated. But if you get vaccinated, that cell grows and divides. You're building the army. A lot of those cells will go away after the infection or after the vaccine, because that's just a normal part of the immune response. But then also a lot will survive as memory cells. So you built that big initial army. You don't need it all, after the infection of the vaccine gets removed. But then there are memory cells all the way in the right-hand side that have increased in number and power and their ability to recognize and clear the infection.